Okay, so this has been quite a difficult moment, I think, for a lot of people who, hey, to put the best face on it, and I think that's accurate, certainly with some people. If you had the Democrats and their crew of censorious prigs like raisin-faced Medusa Debbie Wasserman Schultz coming after you, and then you have J.D. Vance standing up there in Europe speaking out on these kinds of laws that have been weaponized against you personally. I think it's very often human nature to feel like the enemy of your enemy is your friend, particularly when they're taking up your cause. But now, as we're seeing, the Trump administration predictably is no friend of free speech or civil rights. It's starting to force a choice between those who actually believe in it and those who treat it as a grift. So increasingly, you're seeing journalists who are believe that freedom of speech is sacrosanct starting to speak out. So Michael Shellenberger, this actually started with this overall is within a piece that was very pro-Trump. It was actually talking about how the Justice Department had been weaponized by the Biden administration against Trump, and yet he felt a need to insert a bit about Khalidi in there.
To be clear, we must hold the Trump administration to the same high bar as we hold the Biden administration. We are concerned that the Trump administration has detained and may deport a Palestinian student activist named Mahmoud Khalil for his involvement in the Gaza Solidarity encampment at Columbia University and for his alleged support for Hamas. As context for Khalil's statements and his activism, we should keep in mind that the U.S. Supreme Court has repeatedly upheld not just the speech rights of Nazis, but also their right to march through neighborhoods of Holocaust survivors. Because Khalil is here on a green card, the law is not obvious, and it may allow the administration to deport him legally, as Yale University's Jed Rubenfeld noted. But doing so violates the spirit of the First Amendment. And Matt Taibbi has rightly raised concerns about the Trump administration's catch and deport that may use AI to monitor social media accounts of migrants who espouse hateful ideology. But these actions so far pale against the weaponization of government by the Obama and Biden administration.
So, as I said, that piece was really a piece attacking Obama and Biden. Later in the week, he was given cause to change his mind, as we'll see. So he referenced Matt Taibbi. This is the article he's talking about. If Trump blows it on speech, the world is screwed. So let's look at a little bit of that. Forget Khalili. He's not the issue. The problem is Trump officials pledging to throw masses of people out of the country for offenses not yet committed and on vague pretexts like being aligned with Hamas. As Coward put it, see accompanying interview. What does that mean? Similarly, what does it mean to be a Hamas sympathizer? And what constitutes aiding and abetting violations of immigration laws? A standard Trump just decided to employ to deny relief to some federal student loan holders. This use of vague language mixed with speech code concepts is similar to the techniques employed by the politicians Trump and Vance ran against or criticized last year, like Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, Britain's Keir Starmer, or the censorship zealots at the Barack Obama created Global Engagement Center. Weren't conservatives outraged last August when Starmer pledged to use shared intelligence and facial recognition technology to capture alleged speech criminals before they even board a train? Didn't Elon Musk ask, is this Britain or the Soviet Union? And if Trump planned on turning around and immediately deploying the State Department and the DHS to use computerized scanning of social media as a punishment mechanism, why were we supposed to care about State Department funded blacklists, the DHS's moronic disinformation governance board, or suppression of figures like Bhattacharya or Tucker Carlson? Here, 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 here. Um, so now this kind of escalates these questions, I think, for civil libertarians like Glenn, like Matt, like Shellenberger, the fact that the Trump administration is drifting inevitably, as people paying attention to the escalation and the challenging of court orders and the dragging feet in the face of court orders knew it probably would, to defying a court order. So this is the latest on this. Trump administration claims judge's oral directive halting Tren Aragua deportation flight was not enforceable. The Trump administration on Monday brushed off a federal judge seeking to temporarily block the president from using an 18th century law to deport alleged migrant gang members, claiming his oral directive, as opposed to a written order, was not enforceable. Quote, you felt that you could disregard it because it wasn't in the written order? That's your first argument? Washington, D.C. U.S. District Judge James Boasberg grumbled in disbelief during a fact-finding hearing Monday. The idea that because my written order was pithier, it could be disregarded, that's one heck of a stretch, I think. Okay, so apparently he orally ordered them to bring the flights back, but it wasn't in the original written order. Boasberg ripped into the Trump this is a little later in the article. Boasberg ripped into the Trump administration's logic that because the planes flew out of U.S. airspace, they were no longer subject to Boasberg's jurisdiction, and that authorities beyond the Alien Enemies Act were at play. Quote, I think my equitable powers are pretty clear that they do not lapse at the airspace's edge. My equitable powers do not lapse at that point, he shot back during the Monday hearing. The Trump administration noted that 2 flights highlighted by the ACLU departed from the U.S. before Boasberg's written order and oral directives. Quote, as to any flights that were already outside U.S. territory and airspace, anyone aboard had already been removed within the meaning of the Alien Enemies Act and the court's order, and therefore were not covered by the order, the administration argued. The Trump administration has refused to disclose how many total flights have removed migrants under the Alien Enemies Act. Okay, so they're making the argument that because he gave it as an oral order, they didn't have to listen. They're making the argument that once you leave U.S. airspace, you're no longer subject to the court orders of a U.S. federal judge. And they're ordering the flight already took off by the time the order came.
What if he signed it with an auto pen? What would be the protocol there?
Well, clearly they'd have to release them then. So this was an interview with Stephen Miller on CNN that Shellenberger had quite a lot to say about. So we'll listen to a couple of parts of it.
Called the judge's order just earlier today, quote, patently unlawful, end quote, and said that it was an assault on democracy itself. Does that mean that the administration is ignoring this order, and might you ignore future court orders that meet the criteria you laid out?
The President of the United States and his administration reserve all rights under the Constitution to conduct national security operations in defense of the United States. The Alien Enemies Act, which was passed into law by the founding generation of this country, men like John Adams, was written explicitly to give the President the authority to repel an alien invasion of the United States. That is not something that a district court judge has any authority whatsoever to interfere with, to enjoin, to restrict, or to restrain any way. You can read the law yourself. There's not one clause in that law that makes it subject to judicial review, let alone district court review.
So, Stephen, when you say that this person has no authority at all, this is how our system works. It starts with these judges and then continues up. At what point does it become, in your view, legal for the justice system to be looking at this and making a judgment? And I fail to see how there's any other way but to start with where we're starting here before you get to eventually the Supreme Court.
Well, so first of all, there's a term in law, justiciable. This is not justiciable. In other words, this is not subject to judicial remedy. When the president is exercising his Article II powers to defend the country against an invasion, or to repel a foreign terrorist that is unlawfully in the country. He's exercising his core Article 2 powers as commander-in-chief.
Is Venezuela invading the U.S.?
This is a very important point. This is a Title 50 authority. It's a commander-in-chief authority. So just to ask you a simple question, you talk about how the system works. Does a district court judge have the right to direct or enjoin troop movements overseas? Yes or no?
Well, Stephen, my question...
Well, no,
if you could answer my question first,
in other words,
is Venezuela invading our country in a way that would apply this way?
So I'll answer yours and you'll answer mine. Under the terms of the statute, Tren de Aragua is an alien enemy force that has come here as detailed at length in the proclamation at the direction of the Venezuelan government. The statute says that a president has the ability to repel an invasion or predatory incursion that is directed by a foreign
state
government.
or a government, right?
So are we at war with Venezuela? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, it is documented
more or less.
that TDA was sent by the Venezuelan government in the proclamation. And here's an even more important point. Under the Constitution, who makes that determination? A district court judge elected by no one, or the commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy?
Okay. All right.
Well, according to the Constitution, Congress is supposed to declare war on Venezuela if we are now at war with Venezuela, which he seems to be implying. So if you want to cite the Constitution, that's where you would seek the authority for that.
Yeah. So Shellenberger was not impressed. Every single Trump advisor, including and especially Stephen Miller, knows perfectly well that what they did is unconstitutional. So I think rightly he's saying, he's just trying to run cover. He knows damn well that you can't justify a court order. He's not like the Elon-obsessed chuds who believe everything they're told about 250-year-olds getting Social Security. He certainly knows that that's the way the system works. It's not like until it gets to the Supreme Court, an order isn't valid. These lower courts' orders are valid, and if you disagree with them, you appeal it up the chain. He knows that. Here's another section that if you really want to see how full of shit he is and how much he's reaching, look at the argument he makes here.
Did the administration ignore the order from the district judge? It's a simple question.
I've answered it. I've answered it because the Department of Justice has made a filing in the court. But let me make another point. The judge, in this case, put the lives of every single person on those aircraft at risk. Did he know how much fuel was in those planes? Did he know the flight conditions? Did he know the weather conditions? Did he know how many crew hours? Did he know the need for crew rest? Did he know any of that? No. This judge violated the law. He violated the Constitution.
So he defied
the system of government that we have in this country.
Because that does seem...
Did he know if the moon was in Jupiter rising? He didn't, did he?
Does he know how much fuel they had in the plane? Yeah, that's what they do. They take off with like just enough fuel to get exactly where they're going.
Won't anyone think of the fuel gauges?
Yeah. Like my Jewish grandfather driving out to Yonkers. He knows exactly how much gas he needs to get there, and he doesn't put a penny more in the tank. He squeaks it out last second. Hey, sorry, folks. We've been ordered back to the United States. We're going to have to make a pit stop at Port-au-Prince to fuel up. Like, what a ridiculous thing. You know, this Stephen Miller, you know, people say he has incel vibes. I think he has just V-cell vibes. I don't think he's involuntary celibate. I think he's voluntary celibate. Yeah, he's the kind of guy.
What's going on here?
Pussy, yuck. That's Stephen Miller. I don't know what'd you do? You touch something? Here, now it should work. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a stupid fucking bullshit with the StreamYard. They don't have it where I hate this new scenes thing that they have.
Yeah, okay.
You guys need to email StreamYard and please tell them this is not a good idea. They're beta testing this new feature that's a total pain in the ass.
Okay, so for the first part, he didn't deign to form a sentence. He just put out the clown emoji for his argument about district judges not having the authority to restrain the executive. And then on the gas gauge issue, this is Kamala-level word salad and whataboutism by Stephen Miller. He knows better, which means he's gaslighting. And then he quotes from the Federalist Papers, James Madison. The accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary in the same hands whether of one, a few, or many, and whether hereditary, self-appointed, or elective, may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny. All these folks say they love the founding fathers, they love the Constitution so much. Checks and balances is kind of foundational and core to the whole concept. It was a country that rose up against a king. They were deeply skeptical of the concentration of power, whether it be in the executive, the judiciary, of Congress. That is part of why, and some people might say, they made the system so inefficient that it doesn't work. You could make that argument, but you can't make the argument that the courts were not set up to check the executive. And if it turns out that what they're doing is constitutional, you bring it up to the Supreme Court. And maybe you won't agree with the decision that the Supreme Court makes, or maybe you will, but that is the way the system is laid out. And as I've said throughout, if you feel you don't like that system, you need to own the fact that you want an all-powerful executive. You essentially want a king by another name. And I could understand why somebody would feel that way. The system's not working for anybody the way it is right now, right? So I get why you don't believe in constitutional government, and you feel democracy at this point has just become a cheap punchline. I feel that way. Own it. I mean, I feel we should be I feel that turning the presidency into an all-powerful chief executive in the Curtis Yarvin model is a cure as bad, if not worse, than the disease. But if you feel otherwise, then make your case honestly, that you think that going back to a kind of modern version of monarchy is something that would be preferable to what we have. Argue on the basis of what you seem to actually believe. So Shellenberger goes on to make his case. It's up to the courts, not the administration, to determine whether it is non-justiciable. The administration must comply with the order until a higher court reverses it or sets it aside. That's how our system works. If the Trump administration continues with these obviously unconstitutional actions, then it will lose the legitimacy, public support, and power it needs to pursue free speech diplomacy, which would be a very disappointing outcome. And he tags Marco Rubio in that. Now, look at how he's phrasing that. This is not somebody with TDS. This is not a guy with Trump derangement syndrome. Shellenberger has been very supportive, as many of the people who have been personally attacked under the old regime's speech code projects have been, including Taibbi. But he's saying, as is Matt, as we'll see coming up, hey man, this is not what I signed up for. Now, when I saw Matt at Rescue the Republic, I had a short interview with him, and I asked him this. I said, hey man, what makes you think they're not going to now be like the old right wingers we used to fight against? And he said, well, we'll fight them too. Okay. So he's starting to go in that territory. Now this is interesting for anyone in this space and anyone who follows it. So somebody said to him, prepare for the influx of comments explaining that, quote, I used to like reading and respect your principles when you were saying what I wanted to hear. And Shellenberger says, gotta call balls and strikes as I see them. Here, Michael, and we have certainly been on the receiving end of a few of those comments. That is a true story. Michael, I'm sure, is being inundated with that. In fact, if you follow the thread that this was on, you'll see quite a lot of that.
Well, he said the word there. I mean, the operative word there is principles. Guys like Taibbi, Shellenberger, Greenwald, these are all men of principle who understand principle and the importance of principles, whereas Trump does not understand that. Trump understands personality. MAGA is a movement driven by personality. And so if your adherence is to principle first, then yeah, eventually you're going to run into this. Eventually you're going to run into this. And some people more than others have taken longer than others to get here, which has been a point of frustration amongst Russ and myself. We're not hiding anything there. But eventually, yeah, it's gonna. And by eventually, I mean fairly quickly, because big picture here, we're still not out of the first 100 days of this administration. Right. Like, it wasn't going to take long for anyone worth their weight in salt to eventually have to draw some kind of line in the sand. I mean, how far can you go?
Well, this is why I have kind of been taking a wait and see attitude. People have asked directly, because they know we're friendly with Matt, what we think about his reporting, and we've been honest. I have felt that his decision not to want to cover Israel has really hurt his ability to be relevant in a moment when we particularly need his voice. I think he's realizing now that he really can't stay out of that sandbox and stay true to his principles, as you say.
Right.
And I'm glad to see it. But now, and we've experienced this ourselves, if a lot of what you've been doing is criticizing the liberal class and the Democrats who represent them and the corporations who affiliate with them, you will get a lot of people who are very supportive of Trump in a reflexive rather than a thoughtful way, who will start following you because they feel validated, particularly when they see people who are avowed leftists denouncing these same people that they hate. But they think, and we were getting a lot of this at one point, oh, you guys, you're going to become MAGA. You're almost there. And then when you don't, they get angry about it.
Or
now,
tease.
Right. Oh, they thought you were going to convert. You were going to become a Trump supporter no matter what he does, like themselves. So for Shellenberger, for Taibbi, who have both been aligning much more clearly and visibly with elements of the Trump administration than we have, this is all the more so that as they speak out about this, a lot of the people who have glommed onto them thinking, yeah, he's on the left, but he gets it. They're all going to turn on them now. So much so that the article that I just read from Taibbi, he felt a need to respond to all the backlash that he got. So just a little bit of that.
Yeah, if I can just interject one thing really quickly before you get to that, because I think this is important too. Shellenberger and Greenwald are not necessarily of the left. I've always considered Greenwald more of the left than Shellenberger, but what they are civil libertarians. And so that transcends the left-right divide, because Trump is an authoritarian and he's governing as an authoritarian clearly. So whether you're on the left or the right, if you are a civil libertarian, however you label yourself in terms of the horizontal political spectrum there is reason to oppose Trump, even if you're not particularly left-wing. Even if you're a libertarian, there's plenty of reason to oppose what he's doing now. So go ahead. Sorry.
Good point, Charles.
Yeah.
Yes, very. That is true. And really, some have suggested we should retire the terms left and right. It's true. It's just such a useful placeholder. It's hard to figure out linguistically how you would describe those contours. But certainly, I mean, one of the...
Well, I don't think that's necessarily necessary. Like, if you look at the political spectrum, I mean, there's 4 quadrants. There's top is statist, bottom is anarchist, whatever, and then there's left and right. So you could be a right-wing libertarian and still be opposed to the authoritarian qualities of Trump while still agreeing with some of his right-wing economic views. Like, to me, it's not either or.
Sure. But I think it was the second interview that we did with Matt where we were asking him about the left-right thing, and he said, I'm embarrassed I ever cared about it. I just don't care about it anymore. Now, that having been said, ideologically, where does he fit? Yeah, I mean, I would say overall he fits in what would commonly be understood the left. But what all these figures do have in common, Shellenberger, Greenwald, and Taibbi, is they're primarily civil libertarians. If there's one principle that they would consider inviolate, it's civil liberties.
Right.
And yes, you cannot continue to pretend that this clearly authoritarian administration is not what it is when it keeps ratcheting it up almost daily ratcheting up assaults on constitutional protections.
Exactly.
So, but Taibbi must have gotten enormous backlash from his audience, so much so that he responded to it very quickly after the original article came out on Trump and the First Amendment. Note to readers.
Back the fuck up. Oh, no, it's longer than that. Oh, okay. No, note to
a little,
readers.
little
back
longer.
The fuck up. Yeah.
Get out my face, bitches. The standard response to criticisms of Trump-style immigration policies over the years has been that no one is against immigration per se, just illegal immigration. Most people who say that seem sincere about it, but that position is hard to take seriously in someone who now also supports deportation of people who come here legally and haven't committed a crime. It's especially mind-boggling given the mechanism targeting this new group is just another version of the unanswerable, subjective, often computerized standard deployed against conservatives in recent years. The difference is the people singled out as examples will be like Khalil and not, say, Brandon Straka. The other critics are Democratic trolls who say, whatever led you to believe Trump was going to protect speech? Well, I listed many things, from Trump and Vance campaigning on it to them bringing censored people whom I personally know to care about the issue into government, to confronting Europe on the matter at potentially significant cost. But none of that is the point. Those clucking now about Trump and civil liberties are mostly all people who have refused to admit the people they voted for pose any threat at all, let alone the monster that's already turned most of Europe into a police state. If you don't admit what the choices were and are, you're trolling. That's more or less what he said to me, the rest of the Republic, when I asked him, like, why do you really think Trump is any better than these people? Whether you think he will or not, the world needs Trump to hold some kind of line on these issues. And here you can really see the kind of backlash you got. Either way, we have to talk about it, don't we? Come on, guys. Don't we all believe in free speech? No, Matt. There is a large portion of your audience, I think you just discovered, that doesn't give a shit. They're into the Trump branding. They just wanted to be able to misgender people. They really don't care about free speech writ large.
Well, they use these civil liberties argument as a...
Let me just finish real quick. Yep. To his credit, he didn't miss a beat. Right after that, he didn't write this, but he dropped a timeline on the arrest of Mahmoud Khalil. So good for him. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, what happens here is, look, this happens to a lot of people in this kind of space. I mean, I consider, Greenwald and Taibbi, it's probably presumptuous to call them peers, but, they exist alongside us in this space. And I've always kind of felt that we were very much in their lane. Right, like I always, we are in that
ideologically.
Ideologically,
we're in the same family,
in the same what are the Harry Potter teams, the houses or whatever the fuck you call them, right? We're in the same house as them, right? And what happens?
Keaton really can't speak dork.
Well, yeah, whatever. What do they call it? No, what's the house? That's what they are, right? They're houses.
Well, it's it's the houses.
In Harry Potter, they're houses, right? Exactly. Yeah. So I always sort of considered us in the same sort of sections of this space here. And what happens pretty often is
we're like Hufflepuffs.
The Hufflepuffs, right? Exactly. Yeah. What happens pretty often is that a lot of the MAGA people, a lot of the right-wing people, they'll use these civil liberties issues as a net to go in and then scoop up people like us and try and reel us in, because they know, hey, these are lefties, or in Shellenberger's case, I really don't think he's a lefty, but these are generally like left people who we can recruit into our space by signaling our agreement with them on these issues that are very important to them. So, hey, you guys are calling out the the First Amendment violations of Joe Biden. That's great. See, they're lefties that we can have a conversation with because they're willing to call out their side. So they use that issue as a big net to go out and get you. And then they draw you in. And then when Trump wins and he starts violating the First Amendment, they get pissed off. that you actually are a person of principle and are willing to call out their dear leader. That's what it is. They roped you in. They brought you into their world, and they welcomed you with clicks and views and subscription dollars and things like that, and they expect you to never cross them because of that. But if you're a person of principle, you have to, as Shellenberger said, eventually get to calling balls and strikes, whether they have a meltdown or not. And as we know, a lot of them have meltdowns pretty often.
Yeah, and this is why I've been trying to take, we've been trying to take a wait and see attitude. Look, I've said this all along. Obviously, with Shellenberger, I don't follow him as closely as I do Matt. I don't know him personally. I mean, we don't hang out, go to the bar, but I talked to him a few times now. And yeah, I have Matt's book prominently displayed here. I was hoping that he would show principle that way, and I always said, look, man, they didn't send the IRS to my house. Like, I don't know I don't know how what my output would be like if I went and if you watched those hearings, and I did, with Wasserman, Schultz, and Plaskett, that was disgusting. That was absolutely disgusting. All of them, AOC, all of them, AOC threatening to try to put him in jail for perjury after the Mehdi Hassan thing. Look, we hate libs as it is, and we're too small for them to pay any attention to us in that way, right? Like, nobody, they don't know we exist, right? If I were put in that position, we're both hotheads, man. And then Jim Jordan goes and investigates the IRS for you, man. I can't say I wouldn't be more inclined to be all, yeah, Trump's going to restore speech. I don't know. And that's a big part of why I've been very hesitant to be like, grifter. I never really thought it was about that. I never thought it was about that. So either, no. I always thought it was, well, I mean, I haven't been in that position, man. So let's see how it plays out. And I'm glad to see it playing out this way with Shellenberger too. Like I said, I don't follow him as closely. I have read one of his books, which I've found pretty interesting. I don't agree with him on everything. I agree with him on some things, but man, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where you show what you're made of. This is where you're going to find out this moment. This is where you're going to find out who is someone of principle that you might disagree with sometimes, and who's an influencer. Influencers, exactly. This is just a business. It's just a business, and they will tell you any shit that you want to hear because that's how they make their money.
Exactly, because, as, I put it this way before, this Mahmoud Khalil thing is an automatic fail for Trump. This is like taking a road test and going up on the curb when you parallel park. If you do that, the road test ends and you fail. That's what this is. This is an automatic fail. And so if this is not your line in the sand, then you're not a principled person. And glad to see, Taibbi speak out about that. And on the other question regarding the deportations, Shellenberger was able to call balls and strikes and say what this Miller guy's saying is clearly bullshit, and he clearly knows it.
Please clap.